When you go now and you believe that people, not because you're CEO, but they welcome you and they value you still, right? And they ring you up for advice, whether it's from the army or from the industry. Right? I would believe that what you've left behind as a legacy, if that is positive and you made a difference in people's lives, that really is success.
Hey everyone, welcome to a brand new episode of ContraMinds. In this episode, Vignesh and I are in conversation with Colonel Vijay Chadda. Colonel Chadda served in the Indian Armed Forces for more than 2 decades, following which in 1992 he transitioned into the private sector. After holding leadership positions in various large multinationals in the logistics, travel, and tourism space, he became the CEO of the Bharti Foundation in 2008. Over the course of the next 11 years, Colonel Chadda was instrumental in the Bharti Foundation's endeavor of setting up schools in villages and managing them, working with government schools, all in pursuit of access to quality education of underprivileged children. Today, he serves as the CEO of the Air Pollution Action Group, a foundation set up to assist the central and state governments in India's fight against air pollution. Colonel Chadda spoke to us about his time at the National Defense Academy, how leadership principles don't change whether you are on the battlefield or in the boardroom, and his thoughts on what ails the primary school system in India. As always, we have shared selected links and show notes from this episode on the ContraMinds website. You can check it out at www.contraminds.com/blog. So without further delay, here is a conversation with Colonel Vijay Chadda. Hi, Colonel Vijay Chadda. Great to have you as a guest, and thanks for taking time to talk to us, sir.
Thanks, Swami. Thanks, Vignesh. Just Vijay will do. That's Colonel Vijay Chadda is just where I am the official title. I'm very happy to be called Vijay, and thank you so much for having me here and giving me an opportunity to share my thoughts.
Thanks, Vijay. I want to start this conversation, Vijay, with something that I saw you talk about and which I found very inspiring, which is in 1968, you actually went into the NDA, right? And, what were the learnings that something you had there for life that you then had, you followed it throughout your career? So what was it like at the NDA and what are the learnings that you had for life?
Wow, 1968. That's 53 years ago. But I mean, you know, in those days, you know, we really didn't have too many career choices. When you're in school, you you either aspire to become a doctor or an engineer, right? Or you look at going into the armed forces or the government service. There, even the aspirants for IS, IFS were actually lesser in number. It was the bright ones became doctors and engineers, and then it was the armed forces, and NDA was where you appeared in school. So I mean, it was one of those macho things. So from our batch, I think we had quite a. I mean, we were in a co-ed school in Delhi. I don't have anyone in the armed forces. I mean, from my family that way. My grandfather was in the British Indian Army, but I mean, I never knew him. He died before I was born. So I just went to appear for the ND examination with a whole bunch of guys. Got selected and landed up in NDA. But when you say what did it do to me, I think age 16, you pass out of NDA at 19, and then you go to your respective academies, whether Air Force, Army, or Navy, to do your final training before you become a commissioned officer. So I joined the Army, so I went to Dehradun. But I think those 3 years in NDA made a boy into a man, right? Clearly, right? It gave us everything. I would say that like when you all go to college, you remember your alma mater, your graduation degree. So along with our academics, we did whole host of other stuff around the armed forces training, physical weapon training, etc., etc. But more importantly, the instilling of values, the the grooming, telling you what needs to be done. I mean, it's an outstanding institution. I mean, it's something where I believe every youngster should go and spend 1 year, the first and second term. I mean, your life will change. It's one of the finest institutions in the world. I mean, hats off to those who built it in India. I mean, that's what has been the bedrock of our armed forces. It's produced officers for generations, right? And the spirit, the camaraderie that it builds up is unbelievable. I mean, it's like the alumni of a great school. That kind of bonding which you don't find anywhere else. So it's not only that it made you physically stronger, it made you mentally stronger. It gave you your value systems in life. It taught you so much, and that really is what primed me for life, if I say that.
So, when you really say every youngster should go through this, what really was the discipline and regimen that you thought was something that left an indelible memory in what you carried forward in life?
You see, clearly, one, of course, there are learnings in terms of how do you adhere to discipline, a code of conduct, most importantly, right, a regimen, right, but more importantly, the spirit of camaraderie that it builds, and the fact that they push you to extremes, and then you realize that there is nothing that you can't do. I mean, the weakest of people also become strong because of the training. So really, what it does to the mind is amazing. So it gives you a sense of discipline. It gives you a sense of ethos. Of course, there is the the patriotism that it instills in you, because you see so much of what your predecessors have done and contributed to the nation, what's taught to you. I mean, it's a kind of an overall grooming and development of your personality as an individual. It's not about the armed forces or anything else. It's about what it does to you, gives you as an individual.
So, what are the leadership traits? And you are somebody who, who was in the armed forces for 20 years. Then you moved to a corporate job, and in the travel and hospitality industry. So, you are somebody who transitioned, like what you call from the, from the army to the civil street that you talk about, right? So, therefore, what are the leadership traits that you learned at the NDA, at the military, which you applied in your corporate job, which is something that you're very proud about?
You see, possibly this is not what many people would talk about, but I would believe that leadership, wherever you may be, right? It's same. Leadership is leadership, right? You got to lead your teams. You got to lead your people, right? So while they say that no, in the army leadership is different because you give a word of command and they're supposed to obey that word of command, right? So that is just one part of leadership, right? The other part of leadership is where people will follow you with blind faith. That is a leadership that you got to build, and that's a trust that you got to gain by what you do. There's leadership in battle when you say, "Okay, follow me, guys," and they know that many of us are going to get shot. Some of us will not be alive, right? That's where everyone follows, right? But for that to come on a day-to-day basis, right, you got to get accepted as a leader, and it's about how you lead your people, how they see you. What I was taught was that one, we say in the army, we say the Indian army always leads from the front, and statistics also define that, because when you look at the casualties that we've suffered in our wars, in Kargil, in Sri Lanka, in counterinsurgency, right, wherever, the officer to man ratio of casualties in the Indian army is probably the highest in the world. That shows that our officers lead from the front, right? The other thing is, as a leader, you don't ask someone to do what you yourself would not do. Right? And the third and most important trait is integrity, transparency, and honesty. Right? You got to gain the trust of your people, right? And you have to be willing to learn. You just because you're a leader doesn't mean that you know everything. You have the ability to lead. Probably it's an authority vested in you. Even in corporate, when I became a CEO, I mean, I was a CEO, so you damn well listen to me. Yeah, I'm your boss, right? Right. But I landed up in corporate as a greenhorn. I mean, I used to dabble in the share market. I used to read the Economic Times. I had to read news. In those days, nothing was online. You read magazines and you read newspapers, right? So you had some idea. I mean, I would say I was numerate, right? I won't say I was a financial whiz kid, but I understood finances, right? But most importantly, I had to learn everything from scratch, right? So how do you do that? There you are. You're the, I mean, in those days, a general manager. Now they transition to being called, presidents or CEOs and or whatever. But there you are. You're the number one guy there, right? And there are a host of businesses which are there, all of which you got to learn from scratch. Yes, of course, before we joined, because I was joining a company and I was recruited. So I did an induction of a week in each business, right? So whereas DHL was one of our divisions, so I went with the courier boys to deliver packages. I went to the operation center to see how packages are dealt with. I went to the airport to see how loads are put, etc., etc. You went to the customs clearance wing to see how cargo is cleared, etc. So while you do all that, but when you sit down to run business and you give instructions, and when you're going to start questioning people who are actually the leaders of the business, yeah, so how do you do that? So that was the greatest challenge. And how do you adapt yourself to being a leader and yet not being ashamed of saying, guys, I need to learn and you got to teach me, right? I will teach you some things that you probably don't know, but I will learn a lot from you also, right? So the ability to to uh, to accept that, yes, there are things that I don't know and I need to learn, that is also one of the very important traits which, and of course the most important thing is the ability to identify and utilize talent that you have at your disposal.
Wow, that's a great answer, Colonel Chadda. I think as a follow up, I would like to ask that, based on what you just described, leadership almost seems like a fine line between being empathetic and being decisive. So, based on your own background, being in the armed forces and transitioning into civil street, as you say, what are some things that you had to unlearn and you had to relearn to actually ensure that, as a culture, the values are upheld and you're also growing in the right direction?
So to be honest, Vignesh, like I said earlier, also, I did not find the transition in terms of leadership very difficult, because I didn't have any major issues on which one had to compromise. People, either you come out from the armed forces and you come to civil street, you got to compromise, right? I don't believe that I had to really sit down and grapple with my value system to say, ki, you know, this is going to be a. I knew it's going to be a big change. I knew that things are going to be different. It's not the armed forces any longer, right? In the armed forces, you have a degree of protection. Here, you're on your own. If I've been given a job, I can lose that job also, right? And I've got to deliver, right? And but one really did not have to make many compromises. My leadership style did not change, right? Maybe I had to understand that I have got to it's not only all about authority. It's also about leadership through different ways. Yeah, authority always remains because you've been designated leader, right? But it doesn't need to be authoritarian. And between decisive and em- empathy, right? I don't believe you know there is a choice to be made. Yeah? As a leader, you always need to have empathy, and you have to be decisive. You're made a leader because ultimately, you know, it's a decision that you take which will make a difference. Yes, you would get involved when there are key operations happening, and you would oversee implementation, but someone else is implementing on ground, right? But the key thing, whether in war or in business, right, is the decision that the leader takes and how he carry forwards that decision, right? And empathy is a must, because everywhere, you're dealing with human beings, right? Today, of course, there's a machine component also to leadership. But when I came to Civil Street from the army, it was it was still all human beings. Huh? Computers were relatively few and unknown, and they were in a different room with an air conditioner, right? And they were there for data whenever you sought it. It was not part of our lives that like we're using it today, right? But clearly, people are people, right? Even if you're in the army, we have to remember that our wives, children, families are civilians, right? You get posted to a Delhi or a Bombay, you live outside, you're still dealing with people outside. Yeah? You still have those problems, right? So it's not that you're always insulated, right? You know what's going on outside. You know that there are areas where you know your telephone line is not working in those days. I mean, telephone was a big thing. You people probably will not know, but 80s, 90s, you couldn't get a phone connection uh, for the love of life. If you had a phone connection, you were a VIP, and if that doesn't work, the MTNL guy, the telephone guy, if he had to come, right? I mean, until unless you uh, gave him some gratification, you're not going to set your phone right. Yeah. So those kind of things would happen because you want your phone to work, right? So nothing should actually shock you, right? Because you knew that these things happen. It's a question of how you use it, right? Do you use it to run your business? Are you breaking law? Are you conforming to rules and regulations? I mean, I made it a point that we will not compromise on rules and regulation. We will not compromise on personal integrity, right? And when we run business also, we will not compromise on trust with our customers and with our people, right? But do you have to, did I not know that my customs clearance team, right? I mean, I didn't know how to handle it, right? That they said just sign chits for expense because they had to bribe those guys who were doing clearance, right? The standard job. Now I don't know. I can't. I have to trust them. Are they actually paying that money? Where is it going? और उसके बिना काम नहीं होता, because I would check with people, find out what's happening. So either I stop business or I allowed it to happen. So what I would do is that it's stupid, but say how do I do? Delegate it, give it to the accounts team. Say there has to be at least internally some transparency. That is where this is where the money is going. This is where people are recommending. It's not that we are being taken for a ride. So in those days, whether it was a travel business or a cargo business, fairly porous. A lot of airlines would give you kickbacks in cash. So I said, "What do you do it?" They said, "No, we won't give check." So I told my CFO or the head of finance that please keep a notebook which could have killed us. Note it, and whenever appoint a committee to take cognizance of it and then destroy it, so that you have it's not just one person handling it, right? So there is it's the organization which is handling it, because and when I'm talking airlines, I'm talking of international airlines too. That was a norm. So what do you do? Was that right? I don't think that was right. But all those things change over a period of time. Like in today's world, governance is a different story. In those days, governance was another story.
Absolutely. Which, as a follow up, I would like to take you back to 1997, which was a major turning point in your life, and which I believe you have stated that has changed, that did change your life forever. So I want to know, can you tell our listeners what happened and what went through your mind during that time, and what were some of the goals that you set for yourself then, and how they've played out today?
1997 is you're talking about the time when I donated that car, right? Which I won. No.
Yeah, correct, correct.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. All right. No, no. This was a. We used to have these travel industry conventions, which were big ones always, and a lot of fun, partying, good times. And in one of those conventions, I was suddenly told that you're being called on stage because you won this car, and I said I couldn't believe it because I'd never won anything in my life. Even if I'm one of two, you pull out a chit, it can't be me. So some of the other convinced, I was convinced that no, there's something wrong. Maybe it's because though the sponsors vehemently denied, but I believe that I was being given that prize, and I didn't want to take it. And so it's there that I asked them this question that say supposing I don't want this and I don't want the car, will you give me cash in lieu of car? They, yeah, yeah, of course, no problem. Then of course I had to. My wife was there. I had to talk to her. We came back home. We had two daughters. So we said, look, we won this car. It was a air conditioned Maruti in those days, 97. I mean, that was, almost a top end kind of car. And worth over close to 2.5 lakhs. So, I told the kids that, look, there's something wrong, and I think, at least they're giving us money, so let's keep half the money, and we can donate the other half of the money. So first I convinced them. Then suddenly they said, why half? If you're not happy, then let us let us donate the full car. The whole the family came on board, and they said, let's give this to charity. So that's when we started looking, when you give it to charity, what to do. That we started looking at, and I said, my heart is in education of underprivileged children. I do believe that that's an area where all of us need to help, and that's where the donations went in two tranches, and we decided to donate that money. That actually, opened my eyes in the sense that you can make a difference to people's lives. So it took a couple of years more when I became financially comfortable, and felt that it's time that now I started doing something to give back in near full time. Right? So I was trying to do it on my own, but then the Bharti Foundation opportunity came, which was a lottery again. Like I said, life is all about lotteries. I spoke about it's the lottery of birth as to where we all are born, which makes all the difference. And then that's what I say, that for people who've been born in the wrong place, we all have to work hard to ensure that they are not denied the privileges that we got in terms of education. Well, that's what's going to make a difference. That's what's going to give them the opportunities in life. And that's why I believe that primary schooling, government schooling, access and quality is so very important. That millions of kids who are denied that schooling, look at what they're losing out in life. Why should they not have an equal opportunity to everyone else? And that's what needs to be done. So that's what it is. I know rest is all a matter of chance, matter of luck. A job like Bharti Foundation, where I would have done for free, when Sunil, my boss, Mr. Sunil Mittal, said, Vijay, you always say Vijay took such a huge, salary cut to come and do this. I said, Sunil, you paid me a salary which was more than what I ever expected. I would do this for free. So I was still very, very fortunate that you could do so much good and yet get paid for it and run an organization, be part of corporate. So
So, Vijay, you talk about the school education in our country, and you have said that it is in a crisis, critically ill, in an ICU, requires life support. Can you elaborate more on this, given the fact that you ran such a huge institution with across 6 states? So, what ails school education, and what are the challenges?
you see, I think we have lots of things around school education, and unfortunately, I still believe that we're not doing enough to set it right. So there are the very fancy schools, right, to which a minuscule percentage of a population can get in or can afford to pay. Right? Then there are private schools, so to say, right, where a lot of people pay and they give top dollar to put their children in that school. Right? And then there's 75 around percent of our schools which are in the government system, yeah, where the majority of children are in our country go to. Right? So when you look at the quality of schooling right across, including the topmost schools, I don't believe it is what it is. But there you can still get through, because the quality schools still have a lot going for them. There are still good teachers and bad teachers. Right? There are still parents who can give a lot of inputs to their children. Children, in these private schools in big cities, children go for tuitions. They do this. There are lots of ways in which their lack of right things happening in the school gets made up. It cannot happen in the government schools. If the school is not good enough, parents there are, they are earning a livelihood. Besides, most of the kids are first generation learners. So parents cannot give them those kind of inputs at home. Right? So where do they go? And what is a problem? The teaching profession, the quality of teachers that we have in our country. Right? I would believe the teaching profession should be right on top, but unfortunately, teaching is a fallback profession. There are very few who come to teaching because of their love for teaching or their wanting to become a teacher. Right? There are. I'm not saying there are no, but basically it's because of lack of other options or because this is an easy option for a wife who's married and does a B.Ed, the husband is working, so I can teach, my children go to school with me, various other reasons. Government teachers, great job. Government teachers are probably, of course, there are a lot of temporary teachers, but the permanent government teachers are very well paid nowadays in comparison to other private school teachers. They are amongst the highest paid. Leave aside the elite schools, government teachers are highest paid. So there's no reason. And yes, yes, absolutely. And the selection system is not easy. So definitely there are a lot of good teachers in the system. But somehow, the way we are organized and structured, majority of schools are not running the way they should. Right? The schools are dysfunctional. Cannot happen. There are some states which are doing better than others, and within that, there are some schools which are doing better than others. So there are a lot of government schools which are very good. I think you look at Delhi government schools. When I was in school, a lot of toppers used to come from the Delhi government schools. The current government there, I mean, I'm not a political guy. I don't support anyone. I have no issues with anyone because for me politicians are the same. But since we work with them, I do believe that the Delhi government, current government, has done a lot of good work with the government schools, right? So, and in Kerala, a state like Kerala, it was always good. Himachal was a good state. There are a lot of states which are doing good work. There are a lot of schools within other states where schools are running well, but every government school needs to run well, and every government school should at least give adequate quality. When I say adequate quality, it means, I mean, both of you. I mean, I now have grandchildren or my grandchildren. We should be happy to send our grandchildren to the government school, to the neighborhood school, as opposed to going to a Doon school or a Sanar or a modern school or a Sri Ram school in Delhi or Don Bosco or Saint Xavier stuff like that. Why not? It's possible. Right? So if you put pressure and government schools start working and people can send their children to government schools, look at the load it would take off. One, look at the benefit that would accrue because majority of children will start getting good basic school education. That would mean that they would be primed to explore opportunities in life. Even in villages, you'll be surprised. Poor parents, those who can't afford, just because a school calls itself private and English medium and the kid has to wear a tie, they send the child there to pay 1,000 rupees a month and not to the government school, even though the quality of instruction would be equally bad because it's a private school. Why should they do that? Look at the amount of money which can then be saved and used for other purposes. Look at cities, even in a Mumbai, in a Delhi, in a Calcutta, in a Hyderabad, Bangalore, Chennai, Lucknow, A, B cities. Right? There are enough and more parents who are, uh, what do you say, depriving themselves or their families of something to pay their children's school fees. If they can save that school fees, send their kid to a neighborhood school, knowing fully well that he's assured this, same quality of education. May not be a Doon school, may not be a modern school, but at least a B grade public school, right? If you can assure that, and that's what most parents are getting, right? And you get that in a government school or better, and the system puts pressure for those schools to perform. Look at the difference that can be made. It's a long process. There's no overnight solution. Right? People say simple things. A lot of guys I heard saying, make it mandatory that every government official, right, has to send their ward to a government school. Think of a district magistrate sitting, in any district, and his or her son or daughter goes to that government school, right? In that district chosen, the ADM, the district magistrate, the tehsildar, the sarpanch. Can you imagine that government school not functioning? We have access, we have schools. Government schools are on enough land. Infrastructure is there. Teachers need to be there. They need to be made to come to school, right? And they need to be made to teach and perform and be made accountable, right? So at every level, if if sarkari officer ka bacha, central school is a government school, they work so well, right? There's so many other versions of government schools which are running, right, which do well. So why can't a normal government school do well? So we have to work to change that. So that's the only, I mean, I believe that's the only answer for our nation, because you start doing that, the children have access to schools, they have access to quality education, they can make their lives, right kind of instruction happening in schools, they become aware. That's the way for the nation to change, not the way we are going. I think we need to, at least the 20/80 ratio of government schools today, 20% working, 80 not working, that has to change to 80/20. And that's my belief. And I believe that everyone can make a difference. So when people say, "Ki, what should we do? I want to start a school in a village," I tell them, don't start. See, go to your village, interact with the government school, see what you can do to make that government school better. Right? Because everything that we do as individuals, we can't assure sustainability. But a government system is an institution, right? And that can run forever. Like even a Bharti Foundation, a Tata Trust, and all, you can do only this much if you want to do sustainability forever, but you can't impact the masses. To impact the masses, we have to look at how can we make the government system work.
So you are somebody, who adopted almost 1,300 government schools, and you know, you started bringing that change. So you're not somebody who just talks about it, but you actually went out and did it. So what are the challenges that you face there? And tell us some interesting, uh, tips for actually saying how should it be done. You are somebody who's done it.
So one is, we didn't adopt these 1,000 plus schools. This is what we call the quality support program that the foundation runs along with government schools. Right? So adoption is a different thing where you take over a school. Right? We didn't take over school. We did initially take over 49 schools in the district of in Amer in Rajasthan, right? Where we took over the buildings, we put in our teachers and ran those schools for close to 12 years. And we did believe that that was not the right way to go, because you got to make the government system work. You can't bring in your own system to say we'll run the government system. So that is a quality support program where we started programs in school to institute best practices in those schools. So engage with the principals, with the school leaders, first with the state administration to tell them as to what we can do, share our program with them, and then talk to the school leaders to see, how they would be willing to join this program. Some of whom would join, then we run pilot programs, and then we see more and more schools becoming part of this. So this is just a transfer of best practices. And what do you mean by best practices here? Actually, things which are happening in normal schools, we don't happen in government schools. Right? Simple things like the library is working, the computer center is working, teachers come on time, parents get involved, community gets involved, the toilets work. There's a games and sports period. There are children who are involved. There are teachers who are responsible for various things. You form clubs in school. You take them for little outdoor activities, etc., etc. You get them interested in science. So, all things which are normal to us in regular schools and which are not happening in government schools, bring that in first, and then look at competency enhancement. So, never go and tell teachers we'll train you, but if teachers say that we require training in this area, then you organize that kind of training. Right? Schools don't have enough teachers, then you take it up with state administration that why don't this school needs a science teacher. This class 10 doesn't have a physics teacher, doesn't have a maths teacher. Make sure that the vacancies get filled. Make sure that parent teacher meetings happen. Right? And these are little things that even the Delhi government focused on. That's the reason why we started work with them, because the mindset and approach was the same, that you got to support the government schools to make them work, and it has to become part of their life. The school has to become a matter of pride for the children, for the teachers, for the communities, right? And that's how it'll carry on becoming good. So it's a process of revival, it's a process of resurrection, it's a process of ingraining what is right and what is wrong, and gradually getting all teachers to become part of it. Today, I mean, a lot of teachers actually couldn't care because they get salary. No one can take away their salary. They're doing so many things outside the school. I mean, in the villages, you'll find a lot of proxy teachers coming in schools. So, So you earn 80,000 a month, but you pay 5,000 a month to some youngster who's standing in for you. And the school administrative setup is such that no one can be there everywhere. Tomorrow, when you have technology, you have cameras in each classroom and all. I know things may change, but there are huge issues which are there. That can only be set right by the local people. In why shouldn't the sarpanch in every village you know be proud of the school that she or he has and try and make that the best school in the country, the best government school in the country. That's kind of motivation which needs to come. And this quality improvement program, while a foundation may do 100,000 schools, some may do 100 schools, individuals can do one school. Small, factories can do two schools. Like you have factories in a village and then you have a government school there. Instead of a factory setting up a school for its own employees' children, why not work with the government school to make that good enough for your employees' children to study there and get quality education? Easier said than done, but this is the kind of stuff that we need to see happening all across if we want to bring about systemic change.
Great. During our research preparing for this interview, we came across a statement that you had made, which goes like this: I will not allow what is not in my control to prevent me from doing what is in my control. So how do you apply this principle in the work that you do? Can you share some examples with us?
Yeah, surely one this phrase is not mine. It belongs to a very dear friend of mine, and he's the one who shared it with me. His name is Yaur Beg, and he's a great guy. He's a HR professional. We were colleagues once, and he writes books, and he's a trainer, and he lectures in Hyderabad, between Hyderabad and the US. So Yaur told me that, and it stuck. It just says that we whenever we say that, like when I talk about the school, then you get people say, no, I can't do this because the government doesn't support. I can't do this because my neighbor is not doing this, because the policeman doesn't help me. There are so many things which we blame on the system, and we say because the system doesn't support us and we can't make a difference. And what this says is that at least why not do what you can do, right? So I mean, just to give you an example, the other day here, where I live in Noida, we have a lot of U-turns created. And there are enough and more cars and motorbikes which will take the wrong U-turn because they want to save 500 meters and not take the next U-turn. So I stopped at one to stop guys to say, why are you doing this? Why don't you go there? Some people turn around and abuse you. Some listen to you that it's only half a kilometer and you'll save your own life. You might meet with an accident. You're creating trouble for yourself. Then I saw a police car standing there, and I got those guys down and spoke to them, and they said, we've tried it, it never works. So I had to give them the same lecture. I said, just because you tried it once and it doesn't work, even if you change two people out of 10, you're making a difference. We need to continue to make a difference. Right? When we are managing garbage, throwing garbage, that my neighbor is not throwing it, but why should I throw it right? So this is for those little things that we can do. Of course, you can take it to systemic changes also. Right? There are things which are in your control. So it depends on where you are, right? If I was a secretary somewhere, in the government of India, I have much more powers to change. If I'm just a simple individual living in a flat or a house in a locality, there's only that much I can do within my. If I'm the president of RWA, I can do so much more. So within your own sphere of influence, right, there are things you can do, and there are things which will go wrong in case you don't do those things, right? So at least do the things that you can do, right? And don't say that I must wait for things to change before I start doing what is right. So that is clearly the underlying current of this phrase. If I can make a difference, why won't I do it? Someone, you know. By the way, when I stopped the car, my daughter and wife were in the car with me. They got very upset with me. That, why are you doing it? If this guy turned around and hit you, what would you have done? You're old. You think you're a hero. I mean, this, that. So you have to undergo all that, right? But I felt that it needed to be done, so I did that. And I think everywhere where we believe something is wrong and we can set right, each one of us must step out and do a bit.
I just want to spend some time on, you talked about this government schools and adopting, or, not the word adoption, but best practices sharing. Uh, so, what stops it from scaling it? Because what I see all the time is somebody does it in one state in a couple of hundred schools. But just to give you a perspective, we've got 50 million children in the elementary education in our country. Okay, there are close to 1.5 million schools, out of which probably 1.2 million are government schools. So the scale of the problem is of a very, very high nature. And what I also see is that the enrollment to the dropout rates are also very, very high. So clearly the challenges are infrastructure. The challenges are, how do you build a momentum for this? And funnily enough, what I also read in one of the reports is that close to 30-35% of the children in standard 3 4, even though they're attending the school, they don't know how to read a text. Okay, so clearly these are the challenges, and therefore how would you change it? And give me some examples of, in the Satya Bharti schools, and in some of the collaborations that you did for best practices. What do you think are, if you were to say, pick up these 5 6 drivers to change it, what would you think we need to do it? Because it's a huge problem, right?
So yeah, yeah. So one, Swami, the magnitude of problem because of COVID has now gone up manifold. By the way, no one is talking about it. But the fact that for close to 2 years, children haven't been to school, whatever school, right? I mean, we really don't know the enormity of the problem that we're going to have to deal with in terms of learning levels, in terms of the psyche of children, in terms of how they are, how you're going to bring them up to speed. We've spoken a lot about online learning. Schools say we're doing online learning, but we all know what how much of impact online learning will have and would have had, right? And how many people have access, and even if they have access, how many kids have actually been serious, right? So I've seen this happening because I am involved with the school still. I'm chairman of Modern School, Barakamba Road. We know what's happening in that school. I know I have grandchildren, I have kids all around, and it's a I mean, it's frightening actually. So this is something that we'll have to cope with as a nation and as people, right? But leaving that aside, how do you scale? I think that's a very relevant question that you answered. I mean, 1,000 schools in the context of 1.2, 1.3 million government schools, nothing, right? How do you scale? The only way that you can scale is by institutionalizing these processes. Right? How do you institutionalize? Is by creating champions from within the government system, right? So while you may work with 200 schools in a state, 50 in 10 districts, 500 schools, right? But then there has to be a desire on the part of that administration to create a team from within who will then take this to every government school, because this has to become a movement. It cannot, I don't believe there is any private entity. While I keep saying that people need to get involved, we can do that, but that'll still be a drop in the ocean. But the government system needs to change. Someone somewhere needs to take cognizance of this fact. Like, I mean, you need to give it a thought. Every government officer needs to send their child to a government school. Will that work? Is it doable? Hmm. I would believe that that's possibly the simplest answer. The SHO's son and daughter go to a school. I'll be damned if that school is not a great school. Yeah, know, how can that school not be a good school? It may, first year it may take a couple of months, it may take a year, it may take 2 years, but he will between him and the civil administration guy, they will ensure that they get all the bloody government resources to pump into that school, to make that school worthwhile, because their child is going to that school. So somewhere some out of the box solution has to come. You know, we're already too late. We're already too late because children, they're missing education. That huge population of children has actually lost the opportunity. They got to catch up. When are we going to stop playing catch up? When are we going to give the kids a fair chance in life? No, it's worrying. It is something which should worry all of us, and I'm afraid to say that it does not seem to be worrying, because I don't see this as part of any political party's main plank of campaigning. to say that I will improve government schools. I've probably done fetch them votes, or that government schools need to function, right? Or I'll make sure that every child in this country gets quality education. That's one of the pillars of my campaign, of my party, of the government that I will run. That's not happening. And why is it not happening? And if you can't fix primary education and school education, why talk about higher education? In any case, the people who will become eligible for higher education are very small. Right? That needs to be fixed also. That's a different issue altogether, how the higher education functions in our country. But at least basics to know.
So one of the things, some of the experts recommend is almost like saying, take these government schools and build something called a learning achievement contract model, which is like saying, put something together where you look at some kind of a learning outcome, look at incentivizing the government teachers, build a different pathway to actually doing this. Have you seen any global examples of how this is done, and is there anything that we can pick up from there and adopt it here?
There are many such examples. I mean, in the USA, there's something called charter schools. The UK has got a model also of stuff like that. One is making changes in the curriculum and in the methodology, etc. Right? That can all happen, but for all that to happen, the schools need to work. We are dealing with a different problem altogether, where by and large the schools are not working. Right? They need to be the, the head teacher, the teachers need to be made accountable. Children must come to school. We must have proper attendance. All teachers must be in school. Teaching, learning must start happening. It's only then can you start working on upgrading quality. Right? How can you work on quality when the majority of your schools are dysfunctional? So my point is there. I mean, all this is very good. I mean, is there anything wrong with the national education policy? I don't think so. Everyone criticize everything. There are some parts which can be changed, cannot be changed. Each one has a different view in education, right? But for all that to happen, right, you need to ensure that the schools are running and running well. So I'm now talking more about administration in those schools, right? And then we'll get on to the next step.
Can you please talk us through the current challenge that you have taken up, which is the Air Pollution Action Group? What are the problems that you're trying to solve there? Can you please talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, surely. I mean, I thought I should be retiring finally, but here I am for last 2 years plus now, part of Air Pollution Action Group, which is a foundation set up by the founder is a gentleman called Ashish Dhawan, and he was very passionate about this and spoke to me. So I have another colleague called Mohit Byotra, and we three of us spent about 2 months actually looking at the problem, talking to various people, experts in the country, outside the country, seeing what's happening all over, and realizing that this is a huge problem which is affecting all of us. Right? We are all breathing this air. People in and around the NCR, we are much worse off. People in Bombay, you have good days and bad days because you still have the benefit of being, on the seaside. There are people, in places which are you're lucky because of your geography, right? But majority of people are breathing air which is actually killing them. Right? It's a huge issue, huge population. It's a huge problem for and children are impacted. I mean, if you look at the children, if you look at statistics, the number of children who have a lung problem, who have asthma, who have breathing issues, and all in a Delhi and NCR and in North Indian towns, it's unbelievable. We can't let that happen. Right? It's a problem which has many dimensions. There's no one solution. Right? The government has taken cognizance. The government has been talking about it. The government has something called the National Clean Air Plan. It's called NCAP. Right? Based on that, every city has an action plan, a city action plan. Right? There are pollution control boards which are looking at these things. There are major sources of pollution. Right? This air pollution is only one part in the entire environment issue. Right? When you talk environment, there's so much more. Water, etc. This, that. But what are the major causes of air pollution? Right? So there are the and whether 20%, 25%, 22%, that depends on city to city and study to study. But Clearly, there's vehicular emissions, right? There are industrial emissions. There are thermal power plants. There is construction and demolition dust. Right? There is the waste disposal, garbage burning. Right? There's household, what is called household air pollution, where you're using non-clean fuels for cooking. Right? And then what is seasonal in terms of North India is what is called stubble burning, which happens in Punjab and Haryana, where rice fields are burnt to actually get it ready for the next crop to be sown. Right? So how do you handle all that? So there are lots of things which are policy issues, right? Where government is working on it. Some policy changes have happened. You've seen that we come into Euro 6 norms. We're looking at cleaner fuels. We are looking at electrification. All that is a long process, right? We are looking at diversion of vehicles around highways and expressways, right? We're looking at uh, orders have been passed. There are life to vehicles, etc. There are a lot of debate on that, but in like in NCR, diesel vehicles more than 10 years cannot fly, petrol vehicles more than 15 years cannot fly, right? But they'll go somewhere else and fly, right? So we need to find some solutions to all that. But that is one part of it. A lot of research has happened. We said, what can an organization like ours do? So we said, how do we create a space for ourselves? We said, we will help government in implementing their plans. We realize that while there are city action plans, the National Clean Air Plan, not enough is happening around implementation, operationalizing, and monitoring. So we said, let's go with this to say that we will support government by providing project management units and help them in implementing this around doable items. Like, I'll not allow what is not in my control, right? So we said we'll work on what is called dispersed sources, right? So dispersed sources are everywhere, right? So you know, dust here, broken road here, traffic jam in a particular point, unauthorized construction happening, uh, brick kilns burning when they're not supposed to burn, right? And see what a garbage burning happening unauthorized. So how can stop that? So what can the municipal corporation and the local administration do to identify these kind of sources and stop them? So can that address at least 20-25% of the issue? We felt it can, and that's how we started work, and we started offering our pro bono services to state governments. So in 2.5 years, happy to say that today we have project teams working in support of the city of Delhi with every municipal corporation. We did a pilot with South Delhi Municipal Corporation, and today we are with South Delhi, East Delhi, North Delhi, and the New Delhi Municipal Corporation. And our teams are there. So we're carrying out surveys, identifying such spots, working along them. We also created a lot of training toolkits for junior level employees to sensitize them, to make them understand what all this is all about. We also created a dashboard for monitoring. Of course, the Delhi government has its own dashboard, but people who don't have, we provide this dashboard to them for use to actually, so that everyone can see where the problem is and it can be tracked and traced and monitored. Right? Plus, we have young kids, bright kids, management degrees, engineers, professionals, people from industry, people who have worked in social sector want to come here, who are working to with the government, providing the management skills in terms of how to do it. Because every DC has got so many things. This, if you look at their world, this air pollution part is a very small part of the world. But how to bring that onto the forefront, how to get their attention, and how to get them to divert resources and dedicate resources to make sure that we can address it together. So while we've done this in Delhi, we've started work in Lucknow in UP. We've got an MOU with the Bihar government. Started work in Patna. We'll be doing two more cities. We hope to extend it to other cities in UP and Bihar also. And with the Punjab government, we've got PMUs which work along with them to help in bringing down reduction in stubble burning by engaging with farmers. Many things around that, how they can get the implements, the wherewithal, the machines, how to create a software for that, how to get farmers to interact with you, to tell them pluses and minuses, how to create communication, clips which the government will run, telling farmers what is right, what is wrong, why they should not burn, etc., etc. So all that for 2 years we worked with Punjab government. Unfortunately, due to the ground situation, we can't say that we've had a lot of success, but our degree of engagement from last year to this year has increased phenomenally. But because of the farmers' agitation, other political issues, I'm not sure we've been able to make too much of an impact. And the suffering will still be there, right? But this work will carry on. So, so our focus is to work with the government. While we have a research team, we don't reinvent research. We look at what is available and see how we can use it for our work. Right? We're currently setting up a project management unit with the Central Pollution Control Board to help them monitor the implementation of ANCAP across the country. So these little steps have been taken. I do believe that we'll of course now look for funders also because the project has become huge. So far, Ashu is funding it out of his own money, right? We have some other funders too, but I think the program is going to multiply. We'll have people all over, and it'll be in a small way. Our intent was, we said, if we can bring down the level of pollution by 30 to 40% in in 3 to 5 years, 5 years, so we are on the right track, and we put in systems in place within the government. Right? Maybe a lot more will happen if we can handle the macro issues, right? And if that brings about a change, right? But it's something which needs to happen, and our work is there that we said we will assist and support government. We'll work along with government. We are not doing, we're not doing any advocacy. We're not criticizing government, right? We are working as part of the government teams and enhancing their ability to handle this issue. So, simply put, that's what we're doing.
This is quite amazing, right? The stuff that you spoke about is not easy.
Yeah, it's not easy. Yeah.
So, here are some closing questions that we wanted to throw you with. I'll start with mine. What does the word successful mean to you?
Um, I think successful means different things to different people, right? But for me, successful means when you believe that you left behind a legacy that you can be proud of the work that you've done. I think it's immeasurable. I'll just give you an example that I worked in the travel industry for many years, right? So now when I see so many of my colleagues, youngsters, people who joined as trainees with me and now who are CEOs and CEOs of organizations, when there are senior people who recount little things that they say, "Sir, you did this and we learned this from you. I had this problem and you helped me solve that." Right? So I think when you go now and you believe that people, not because you're CEO, but they welcome you and they value you still, right? And they ring you up for advice, whether it's from the army or from the industry. Right? I would believe that what you've left behind as a legacy, if that is positive and you made a difference in people's lives, that really is success.
Right. My next question, Colonel Chadda, is what are some of the books that have influenced you the most in your life?
Wow. Let me make an honest admission that as far as that is concerned, I'm an unpad. I read a lot. I enjoy my reading. I read a lot of fiction, right? But I think I've learned from people. I can't say that there is a book which has changed my life. Right? There are lots of books I've enjoyed, lots of books from which I've learned a lot. Right? You know, but I mean, I've worked with various people within the armed forces and outside, and learned from them. And this is both senior and junior. It's not only and also your peer group. Learnings are from everywhere. So I mean, I just can't say that you only learn from a boss. You learn from so many people and so many instances. Right?
Great. My question to you is what's the one piece of advice, best piece of advice anyone has ever given you?
I think I've got so much advice, and there's been so much good advice. I mean, to pick out the best piece of advice is a tough one. I think.
But tell us the top one or two that come to your come to you as you speak.
I think clearly that it's don't believe that there is anything that you can do that will ever be hidden. So you need to be transparent. You can never believe that you'll make a fool of people, right? So that tells you that you got to be honest, you got to be transparent, right? And you can't duck issues, you can't hide things beyond a point, right? So I think that is really because I believe that that is critical. I tell people that always remember that you're your reputation far outlives you wherever you've been. Right? It's not about what results you achieved. It's not about what you did for the company. It's not about how much money you made. It's about what they remember about you as a human being and as an individual, which is most important.
Fantastic.
If you could invite four guests for your dream dinner, who would they be and why?
And these are, I mean, for a guy like me at my stage in life, I really, I would enjoy dinner with. I mean, my dream dinner would be with my dearest friends or very close family. Right. I honestly, I have no aspiration to a dream dinner with any celebrities or anyone. Because the one other reason is,
No, we are not,
you know,
no, we are not even talking about celebrity. I think the fact that you're talking about close friends and family itself is something that is brilliant, because I think Vignesh introduced me to something which is called how do you measure life, right, Vignesh? And there it's a very interesting concept that he speaks about, which is therefore, you know, the value systems are built around your family and friends. So there's nothing wrong, with the celebrity dinner. But I think what you said makes a lot of sense.
yeah, and in the earlier days, you wanted to meet celebrities. The media, etc., was not like what it is today, right? And you didn't have access to so much information. Then you sit down with dinner with people, you'll get to hear them, you get to get gyan from them, you get to meet them, right? So understanding and getting information and all is not so much of a challenge nowadays. So that's maybe another reason why that aspiration, and of course my age and life, that that at this stage in life you look at what has real meaning for you.
Yeah. What would be the three or four things that you would recommend to an 18-year-old studying at a university today?
Wow, that's it's surprising that you should ask me this question because we were struggling with it. I have a 15-year-old grandson, and my wife and I were talking, and we're looking at his peer group. We're looking at how how what are their priorities in life and how the world is changing. And then of course you have now, for whatever it's worth, what happened to Aryan Khan and the whole drug scene, etc. So I don't know how to give the advice, but I think one. I would say the advice, whether you're giving it to 18-year-old or a 25-year-old, doesn't change. I mean, be committed, right? Set your goals in life, right? Have fun, do everything within limitations, right? And have a code of conduct, right? Be true to yourself, and remember that what is gained and what you achieve with hard work and by what you do yourself, right? That is far better than something which comes easily to you. So working hard, commitment, yet enjoying, staying within boundaries and limits, right? Because there are so many distractions. Right? Being true to yourself, and remember that each one of us has a responsibility not only to ourselves but to our parents who have hope on us, to our families, and to our communities. So always have that sense of responsibility, and never forget that you can always achieve. Each one of us can make a difference. Each one of us can be what we want to be.
That's absolutely brilliant. I think it's so true and amazing. So thanks a ton, Vijay. It was absolutely brilliant talking to you. Some of the points that you made on some foundational changes that needed to be done in our government education and in schools, and the work that you're doing on air pollution, and uh, your ability to kind of drive this is something that is inspiring. And thanks a ton for taking time and talking to us.
Thank you so much. And I must also put on record, I've said this earlier, I've been a very lucky guy. So wherever I've been, I've had fantastic teams. I mean, great teams who've actually, helped me in what I set out to do, whether it was business, whether it was, the foundations that I worked in. So I remain ever grateful to them because nothing would happen without your teams. And that's what leadership is all about.
Thanks for listening to this episode. For selected links and detailed show notes, visit www.contraminds.com/blog. Follow ContraMinds on social media and let us know who you would like to see next on the podcast. If you're listening to ContraMinds on Apple Podcasts, do share your comments and give us a rating. We are keen to know what you're thinking. ContraMinds is also on YouTube. If you're listening to the podcast on YouTube, hit the subscribe button and stay up to date on all our releases. Thanks for listening and stay safe.